I'm sitting here with Brian Hopkins. For those of you who aren't aware or don't know Brian, I first met Brian when I was 19 or 20. Worked under him as an intern, worked alongside him for a season. That's very kind of you. Then, of course, I got to go to Harvest and help start the high school ministry. He came to Harvest as an XP, worked under and with him there. Brian went off and planted a church in Bozeman called Journey. We kind of lost touch for a few years there. And then there was this conversation about planting a church in Helena, and to your credit, you kind of stuck your hand in the air and went, we want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Turns out you and I went to George Fox together for 3 years.
Yep.
Got to travel a couple times a year together, have all these intense conversations about church and church planning and church culture, and while listening to these classes. And so much of our culture and DNA comes from you and Vern, Journey and Harvest, and just that friendship and relationship. And I think to an even larger extent, all that time at George Fox.
Yep.
And so there's all these phrases that we use and all these cultural values. And I thought it would be fun, we thought it would be fun to go back to you, who's like the originator of many of those for us. Like, it's where we learn them from, and go, okay, so what's behind this? And as I've processed that for months now, kind of went like, okay, so what are the big ideas I've taken from Hopkins? The first one that comes to mind for me, and this was definitely a George Fox thing, where I can see my whole faith experience and the way I view people and the way I view God and the way I view that God views people hinged upon this idea of taking a high view of others. And I remember it was you who talked a lot about the choice to take a high or a low view of others.
Yeah.
So maybe would you just describe what that means to take a high view from the way you learned it and where that came from for you?
Yeah, absolutely. The high view of people thing, I picked up a lot of that from Derry Long, who of course you know, but if you sort of back the train up from the conversations with Derry Long that were real formative for me in that vein, it's rooted in the Imago Dei, really, right? The image of God stamped, emblazoned, imprinted on every single human being. And in my life, this gets tested a lot because you want to have a really high view of people, and you want to envision the Imago Dei in every single person that you ever run across. And yet people act in low ways to you and to others, which causes you to want to see them in a low view. But you just, it's this sort of intellectual, emotional exercise I'm always doing where I go, oh wait, the Imago Dei is emblazoned upon that person no matter how poorly they treat me, no matter how poorly they treat other people. So it's really rooted in the way God sees people. That's the way God sees people. Yeah. So just trying to pick up a little on how he views every single person, no matter how poorly they act, which is me some days, right? Really grateful for that value that others I've seen live that out, model that out, and then it's been real shaping to me. I certainly can't take any credit for that. God gets that one.
I remember this interaction we had in class, and I can't remember what class it was, but I remember asking you, like, okay, you seem to have this ability to treat people well no matter what. Like, how do you do this? And do you remember how you answered?
No. Thanks.
You said, boy, I didn't think I had to go through examinations like this until I was 50. But then you said, I'm constantly trying to find something in everybody that I like.
Yeah.
That's all a part of that same thing you took?
That's all a part of that. And I think it's easier for God to do that than it is for me and us to do that. And so you're always looking for the good. You know, you're looking for just a sliver of good. And frankly, it goes back to, I want people to do that with me and give me the benefit of the doubt, right? You just want everybody to, it's the whole golden rule, treat people like you want to be treated.
Yeah, good point. Another memory, and I hate to be so nostalgic, but there was a church that we drove by all the time coming from the Edwards on the way into class. And of course, contextually, this was when Narrate was being born, is in these face-to-faces, in these classes. The name Narrate was even, I remember coming up with that while I was supposed to be listening to a Bruner lecture or something.
Yes.
We drove we drove by this church yet again. They had your kind of classic church marquee board, and it was the first time I'd ever heard the phrase you said, "That's a very telling culture."
Ah, yeah.
Where did you pick up on that?
Yeah, that's another Derry Long-ism. You can see the really significant impact and influence that Derry's had on me.
Sure.
Where we in Christianity, much of it, evangelical Christianity, are so good at telling everybody everything. Like, it's almost like we have such a low view of people in many respects that we think, oh, we have to tell, because nobody knows anything. Nobody gets anything. I think there's some people who think they're the only ones who ever get anything, and so they have to disseminate all that they get that nobody else does out to people, which I think completely disregards the Holy Spirit's presence in the Christ follower's life, right? If I screw up, when I screw up, the Holy Spirit does a really good job of telling me, convicting me of like, man, Brian, you dropped the ball. So, I might have blind spots. We all do. But by and large, people know when they've crossed a boundary line. They just know. And yet, we just think we got to put our finger in everybody's chest and say, you messed up, you thought wrong, you did wrong, you acted wrong. That culture is often very graceless, right? It's without grace. It's very heavy-handed, burdensome. And Jesus says, look, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, right? But then this telling culture sort of lays this heaviness over the top that I think smothers people's faith journey. Doesn't make them want to wake up in the morning and go, okay, God, what have you got for it? It's quite the opposite of that. It's like, oh man, I'm just going to mess up again today. And I think Jesus did a terrific job of listening to people. As much as he told, he listened. It's the whole, we have 2 ears, 1 mouth thing, right? We ought to be listening twice as much as we're telling.
Oh man.
And
yeah, so they're very related. And for me, I think that's a huge piece of why we lead as much as we do with questions. Is I'm constantly thinking that statement through, and some of what you talked about there so much in those years was giving people the dignity to think for themselves and come to their own conclusions versus telling them everything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Adam, if I could just say this, one thing that has greatly impacted me and influenced me from you is the way that you talk about and the way that you lead and the way that you think. That sort of, I think the way I say it most of the time is answering a question with a question.
Sure.
I totally got that from you. And I do it all the time. And I have people tell me too, Brian, you're always asking a question in response to a question. I go, yep, that's exactly right. And I mean, I think we're in pretty good company. We lift that right from Jesus, don't we?
Right, yeah. Well, and I think that was a big part of what we took from Fox.
Yes.
Was that I tell people all the time, it's not a denominational school. There's not a party line. It's very much a conversation. And
yes,
I just wish it was as easy to do in interpersonal relationship as it is from the quote unquote pulpit. Because it's one thing to do it when you have 30 hours to script your words, and it's another thing to do it in a heated exchange with a 13-year-old. So which was my next
question. Who's your kid, by the way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
So which is another question I have is, so how are you incorporating the high view opposite of telling culture as a parent? Because you've got like 65 children. So,
that I don't know how well I'm doing that as a parent, honestly. And I think the telling sort of squishes out of you. You just become a teller when you're under pressure. Right? Which parenting does an awful lot, Clean up your room, and like you don't want to have a conversation about the necessity of cleaning my room or doing my homework or not misbehaving with that kid,
Sure, yeah.
So then the telling just sort of squeezes, stress squeezes it out. But I'm always looking at the ways that I can encourage my kids. Like looking for that little glimmer of, like they could be doing awful in just about every zone, but trying to find that slice grabbing onto it, the slice where they're thriving, grabbing onto it and sort of exploding it so that that washes across the rest of them. And, you know, you grab your kid's phone and you see a bunch of stuff on there that it isn't great, you know, where you're like, dude, what is this? And what is this? And what is this? And then listening to them say, Dad, that's not, you know, Dad, that's not, Mom, that's nothing. And then just choosing to believe that, like, okay, yeah, I see how you, I mean, we're not excusing poor behavior, but helping give the benefit of the doubt. And knowing that our kids, they also have the Holy Spirit inside of them. So they know. And most of the time you sit down with your kid and you go, hey, that doesn't look like it's going very well. And they go, yeah, Dad, I know, I wish. Or the even better one is when your kids, you know, end up in the weeds somewhere and they come grab you and go, hey, Dad, I need to have a conversation with you. And you're like, okay, what do you? And then they just dump it out. They just dump it out, weeping in tears, and you go, I like this relationship culture that we've tried to create. And Adam, it's a way messier way to parent than the sort of drill sergeant method of parenting.
Which incidentally isn't all that effective either.
No, it's exactly right. But the thing about parenting that Dan and I are trying hard to do is create an openness of like everything we do, we want it to deepen relationship, not push it away, right? And there's lots of things that parents do that push kids, repel kids away, and like we try really hard not to do the go to your room thing. Actually, we go, hey, come here and sit with me. Like, so it's like time in, you know? Like you're gonna sit right here and you're not gonna go over there, and you might not wanna be with me right now, but we're gonna sit right here. We're gonna sit right in my lap, and we're gonna have a little moment here that's attaching deeper.
Positive interaction versus...
Exactly, than repelling further. Because a kid doesn't go to their room and get a softer heart, in our opinion, right? They go to their room and walls start getting built, hearts get harder, and...
Oh man, we should have maybe done a whole parenting thing. That's really...
No.
But it is all connected to the
Give
high
me a few
view
years.
And,
yes.
Wow. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, so much of the idea that you treat guests well, excellence.
Yeah.
I mean, I think between you and Vern, you're the two people who taught me excellence. And obviously you created this extraordinary culture at Journey and then got this opportunity to go to Bayside and be a part of creating. I'm curious where you're at on your journey with excellence now and how that's different from maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah. I think it's evolving a bit. In the early days, I think I would have, you know, the party line was, it's excellence, not perfection. But if you peeled the onion there, you'd go, actually, you wanted perfection. You know, you were hoping for perfection, aiming for perfection, and you begin over years to see, that's not real healthy.
The drive for perfection.
The drive for perfection.
And really what we're talking about here is the Sunday morning experience and work culture. Is that?
Yeah, certainly Sunday morning. And then just everything that we do as a church, as a community, the way I say it is, look, we're the lens through which we want people to see God, right? Which is a little heavy.
It makes me want to get a different job.
Yeah, precisely. And so you go, I want our lens to be as smudge-free as possible so that people have the clearest view of God that they possibly can have. And stuff that isn't excellence, poorly executed, or, you know, halfway done, smudges that mirror. Yet, over years, you begin to see the drive for perfection creates things in me and creates things in other people that don't feel very good. Creates a culture of uncertainty, unhealth, lots of anxiety, right? Around people who go like, oh, I hope I did that well enough, right enough. And so you just begin to relax that stuff a bit. Okay, guys, we still want to be excellent. We still have to be excellent. Back to the lens
Right.
analogy. But maybe you just don't drive it so hard.
Like I had that experience actually 2 weeks ago where a guy that I've built friendship with over the last couple of years coaching baseball, and we talked very, very little about God or my job. He knows about my role because we
course he
coach
does.
together, so we're constantly kind of,
Yes.
like even today, we move practice to 11 because I'm here working until 11. So he gets that piece of it.
Yeah.
Texts me on Saturday night, hey, are you involved in the service tomorrow morning? I think I'm coming. The way it heightened my senses
Yeah.
and the way I wanted everything to be perfect that morning,
That's exactly right.
it was a good reminder to me of what it's like to invite your friend and hope that
Yep.
this is one of the services, one of the gatherings that you can be proud of.
Yep.
And yet I also know, like, I think that's kind of what we're alluding to and maybe tiptoeing around is the
Yeah.
soft underbelly of church culture is also that
Yep.
if we're not careful along the way to creating those experiences, there's a lot of woundedness
Oh, man.
and disillusionment and
That gets created
exactly
by that hammer down.
Right.
Everything has to be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've now been a part of 3 really excellent environments. So I assume that yours is constantly evolving
It's
from Harvest to Journey to Bayside.
Yep. My newest expression at Bayside is a very large church with it's a best idea culture. So the best idea wins no matter where it comes from and no matter when it comes. So you could have 20 or 30 people working on a major project for months and months and months. And 15 minutes before that plan is supposed to come out the end of the funnel, somebody walks into a room and says, yeah, that's all good, but here's a better idea. And all of a sudden around a little room, heads start nodding, and all that work goes right away, and it's go time in 15 minutes, and the whole thing just shifted, and you sit there, especially if you have my personality, and you go, that's not gonna go very well, especially if I have some piece of it to carry, and it includes a stage and a microphone, and I'm supposed
Right.
to, and people look at you like, it'll be okay. And I go, I don't think it's gonna be okay, actually. So just learning to relax about some of those things, and you go do it, you execute it, you go, okay, that went pretty well. And I think what you find is that we're way harder on ourselves on the execution of, let's say, a Sunday morning than your friend who you coach with ever would be, right? If everything isn't perfect, chances are they probably didn't notice that that word was misspelled on the screen, or
Sure.
that song started in the wrong, whatever it is. I forget my place in the sermon, whatever it might be. I think they're way more grace-filled and understanding.
And yet we kind of hang our hat, so to speak, on an experience that's
Yes.
engaging and refreshing and
Exactly.
and not being the hokey, like,
Yep.
this is a museum. People haven't done things this way for 60 years. Such a tension. One of the other things that I think about, and I don't really have the bullet point phrase for this one, is, but being generous to a fault is definitely something, and I think a lot of that I experienced that interpersonally with you, like just incredibly giving. But I do remember, I mean, you talked about being, the way you would say it is generous to a fault.
Yeah.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to over-spiritualize this thing, but honestly, you just go, wow, God gave literally everything. He gave until it hurt. And we ought to have that same pattern in us. And if you look at Dana and my, let's say, just look at our financial world, hardly an empire by any stretch of the imagination, you'd go, you guys have made decisions over the years that most people with a business mind would look on and go, that's stupid. You can't do that. Don't do that ever. And I think if you look at what God did with his son, you'd go, from a business mind, you go, yeah, you probably wouldn't do that. It just doesn't make any sense. And so that's sort of the pattern that we've attempted to lay over our lives, and just live that way, be that way. It's the very least we can do, and it comes down to time and certainly finances and how we try to be incredibly open-handed with all that. Givers, not takers. We want to be givers, not takers, and have seen God bless and move, and in ways that are just like you look at. We've adopted 9 kids, all 9 of them from Africa,
And birthed.
And birthed 4. So there's 13 kids.
You have more disciples than Jesus.
Yeah, yes. That's exactly it. And sometimes I wonder why, because I'm not Jesus. We couldn't do that. Like, there's no way that we could possibly ever pull off just the financial part of adopting 9 kids from Africa. And saw the generosity of people from all over the United States rise up to help make that happen is nothing short of miraculous and remarkable. It was $500,000 in everything to adopt all 9 of those kids.
Wow.
And I'm a pastor, and I don't have $500,000. We had a lot of skin in the game personally, but then most of that came from other people.
That's pretty awesome.
Them realizing we can't adopt or shouldn't adopt, or we're not made this, but we can be a part of this.
Sure.
Right? And I think that's the whole, the beauty of the church is we can all have skin in the game via our generosity, and that's time, talent, treasure stuff.
Sure.
Via our generosity.
Well, what I watched from you, in all those years working with and under you, was you never allowed where's the money going to come from to be the issue.
Yeah.
Which didn't, and I know that doesn't mean that you just were racking up credit card bills.
No.
Which is also some of that scarcity versus abundancy, which is, I don't think I use that phrase as much as I did in the early years.
Yeah.
But I know that you're the one that really kind of championed that in my development of, we can have an abundant mindset or a scarce mindset.
Yeah. Some people hold to the view that there's never enough. We always have to fight for my piece of the pie, and whether that's with people or whether it's with money and resources. And so you just go, well, wait a minute. There's a whole bunch more people out there who, you just look at it from a church perspective, who aren't part of any church whatsoever. Like, we'll just go after them. We don't have to quibble over these people who got upset and went over here to this or whatever. We just go, yeah, there's actually more people out there who need to hear the message of Christ. And then finances, that's an easy one. You go, it's all God's anyway. He's got it. He's got it all. And I don't have to worry, stress. And it doesn't mean we are aloof from it or sort of overly casual about it, but we just go, God will provide, there will be enough, and there always has been.
So it just strikes me that you always were a guy who erred to the side of generosity, erred to the side of, resource follows, what was the thing you said?
Resource follows vision.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. And I've always, in that vein, if I may, I always hope that you and me and anyone I care deeply about has way more vision than there are resources. Right? When resources outpace vision, I think you got a problem. Right? You should always have way more vision than you have resources, because then it invites people into moments of extraordinary generosity to go, geez, this is pretty cool. I'm gonna allocate my resources towards this.
So one of the phrases that I say from the stage I'll bet you once a month, is that Narrate wants to exist in such a way, that should we cease to exist, the most ardent critic of Christianity would be bummed. That we don't necessarily need them to agree with us, but we want to serve in such a tangible way that they go, huh, okay, well, it's hard to argue with that. And even within Grand Street, and I think
Yes.
I'm proud of
Yes.
Narrate and the council. Like the day we started meeting there, we said, we want to meet here and serve this public venue to the extent that if someone's walking out the door who's a vested, member of Grand Street, they might go, I really don't like churches and I don't like the Jesus thing, but I'm really glad that church meets there.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I know I learned that from you. Where did that come from?
I'd credit Vern Streeter for that one, where he just talks about, look, the church exists fundamentally to serve its community, right? So instead of just existing to hold nice gatherings on Sundays, which by and large, most of the community doesn't care about that. Let's just be frank.
Sure.
Most of the community doesn't care about that. Lots of churches think that just because they do this thing on Sunday morning or whenever they do their thing, they put a shingle out front that says they do their thing on Sunday morning, that earns them the right for people. Well, people ought to just show up. And if they don't show up, well, there's something wrong with them, right? That's the way it goes a whole bunch of the time.
Right, wow.
So actually building a church in a community in such a way where the community cares, maybe not so much in the beginning about what happens on Sunday morning, but where the community cares about the other expressions of that church, in your vernacular, the scattering,
Yeah.
right? How the scattering affects them, impacts their life, gives hope, encourages, all those kinds of things, where what your church does meets up with their life, where they could care less about the Jesus piece, right? They're not down with that. They don't get that. They're even opposed to that.
Sure.
But they look on at what Narrate does in the community and they say, I'm not down with the God part. But if Narrate went away, that would be bad for our community because of all the ways that Narrate is positively impacting its community. And that, Adam, that drives me, that compels me day in and day out as a leader, as a pastor, is our church relevant
Right.
to the community?
Thanks for your impact. Thanks for investing in us. Quite literally, we wouldn't be here without you. So thanks a lot.
Thank you for who you are, and what you're doing in Helena is fantastic. I'm one of your biggest fans and cheerleaders, and always will. So please keep that up, and I'll come back anytime.
All right, you got it.
Just as long as it's July, August, or September.
Yeah.